and reason know only war!
In order to understand the Black Legion's history, we must go back 10,000 years to the fall of humanity. During the civil war called the Horus Heresy, the four dark gods of chaos consumed and corrupted half of humanity's most powerful soldiers, and filled them with rage, desire, despair, and hubris. The corrupted war master, Horus, led the traitors in this intergalactic civil war. His soldiers, called the Sons of Horus, had built the Imperium of Man, and now they would destroy it.
Die, loyalist slave!
Hundreds of planets would be destroyed by the traitor legions, and in a desperate attempt to push back the betrayal, the Emperor assaulted Horus on his warship, the Vengeful Spirit, but was mortally wounded. But fanaticism blinded Horus's mind, and the Emperor would eventually strike him down. Now what? The remaining traitors were left aimless. The warrior who took up the mantle of leadership was Ezekiel Abaddon, captain of the first chapter of the Sons of Horus, which was signified by his chapter's iconic black armor. Abaddon led the charge and fought his way into the throne room to recover his father's body. Soon after, there was an event called the Great Scouring. The traitor legions fled from the Imperium and retreated into the Eye of Terror. Basically a portal to space hell. The traitors were now trapped in this twisted reality and built dark fortresses on demonic-infested worlds to stew in their hatred. They had bargained with these dark powers to rule over the galaxy, and instead, they were left fractured and broken in a cursed plane of existence. The Sons of Horus found refuge on the world of Malium, and used slaves they had captured from the Heresy to build a fortress called Lupercalis, where they would protect the corpse of their fallen leader. The legions, once unified by Horus, turned against each other to vie for resources in this barren, twisted universe. The Legion Wars were violent battles motivated by selfish impulses and short-sighted incentives. Meanwhile, Abaddon, one of the few captains of the Sons of Horus left, was disgusted in what his brothers had become. The traitor Astartes were warriors, created to fight in epic battles to claim the galaxy and reveal the truth of the universe. Not fight over table scraps and pointless conflicts. They were doomed, and Horus's once terrifying force of traitors were now just corrupted monsters acting on instinct. Abaddon took his ship, the Vengeful Spirit, and ventured into the furthest depths of the Eye to meditate on the failures of his brothers. Meanwhile, conflicts between traitorous warbands only became more brutal. The Traitor Wars were also known as the Slave Wars, because of the main aggressors, the Emperor's children. The Emperor's children are worshippers of the chaos god Slanesh, the goddess of pleasure, pain, hedonism, and excess. These sadistic soldiers love nothing more than inflicting these intense emotions on themselves or others to please their god and their own sick enjoyment. The Emperor's children assaulted the other traitor legions, stealing their slaves they had gathered during the heresy, basically just to torture the shit out of them for their own pleasure. And honestly, you can't get more grimdark than that. Oh, but it actually can. Fabius Bile is a mad scientist of the Third Legion, outfitted with a cloak made of the stitched-together flesh of his foes, and is infamous for his total disregard for morality when it comes to his experiments. His master plan was to steal the body of Horus and clone the Primarch so he could be reborn again. He did just that, stealing the dead War Master's body and leaving the Sons of Horus base in utter destruction in the process. The next chunk of lore comes from the book The Talon of Horus. In the book, the sons of Horus were left broken and desperate after the Emperor's children attack. Former captain of the First Company, Falcus Kybir, called for allies from the past civil war for counsel. Those who answered were the legendary warriors Iskandar Kaon, formerly of the Thousand Sons, and Kjorvine Urkis, former legionary of the World Eaters. The concept of cloning a Primarch was considered absolute heresy, even for these heretics. Also, if the Emperor's children had a copy of Horus, it would surely tip the scales of the Legion Wars in their favor. In order to stop the Third Legion and their twisted experiments, they needed to be unified by a leader. That is when Falcus's seer revealed that he was enlightened with a vision. The legendary captain, Ezekiel Abaddon, might be located all the way on the other side of the warp. So all three of these warriors knew they needed to find Abaddon. He would know what to do in this darkest hour. So the trio of champions and their followers boarded the warship called the Talok, and the ragtag group of traders ventured deep into the warp. Meanwhile, Abaddon played a lot of video games and drank a lot of moonshine. But oh yeah, he also meditated on the failures of his brothers. During his meditation, he stared into the Astronomicon, a beacon manifested by the God Emperor, and it's the North Star the Imperium uses to navigate through the warp. Ezekiel's eyes glowed with radiant gold, inflicted by the Astronomicon during his solitude, and representing the enlightenment and the rage against the Imperium he had harnessed. And eventually, after months of travel, his wandering brothers would find the vengeful spirit. It was a vessel of legend, once commanded by War Master Horus, and now it was isolated on a deserted tundra planet in the furthest reaches of hell. Commander Abaddon, we have arrived. We've received a vision that you would be here. Commander Abaddon?
1 second!
Abaddon, we have traveled for months across the storms of hell to reach you.
Yeah, I know. Shut the fuck up. Can't you see I'm gaming?
Are you sure this is the right idea? Once Abaddon was finished, he offered them his specially brewed hard liquor. Yes, that is actually a part of the lore. The brothers that greeted him were Iskandar, Kjorvine, and Telemachon, an Emperor's Children warrior. Wait, what? Yeah, he defected from the Legion, and also Falcus was mortally wounded and is hanging out in a test tube where he's getting possessed by a demon. Look, I'm summarizing the entire book here, so bear with me. Let's focus on Abaddon, okay? The three discuss the fate of Horus and how the Emperor's children planned on cloning a bastardized version of the Primarch. It was then Abaddon revealed that he was the one that summoned them there. They were summoned because he no longer sought temporary alliances for pointless conflicts. He wanted something pure, glorious battle with meaning amongst his brothers. He knew the legions these warriors had originally fought for no longer rang true in their hearts. Together, they could start a new legacy, no longer be the sons living in the disgraced shadows of their fathers. Defeating the clone version of his father, Horus, would be a galvanizing symbol to unify his traitor brothers once more. And so, Abaddon and his new allies traveled to the Emperor's Children homeworld of Harmony to end the Legion Wars once and for all. But the battle was short-lived because of Iskandar Kaon, whose actions perfectly exemplify the ridiculous scale possible in the 40k universe. You see, Iskandar, he was a part of the Thousand Sons, a Chaos Legion known for their powerful psychic magic. So Kaon and his new allies boarded the Vengeful Spirit, and the Master Spellcaster used all of his strength to drag the 2-kilometer-long vessel they arrived in, the Talok. And bear in mind, this was once piloted by 25,000 soldiers, and he dragged it across the Eye of Terror over the period of months. And then he launched it like a spear directly at the Emperor's Children fortress. Ships fled from the now fractured world, and that is when they spotted it. Fabius Bile's ship, which held the clone of Horus Lupercal. Abaddon's forces breached the ship. The commander wore the talon of Horus, his former father's weapon, which would be used to kill his bastardized clone in brutal, poetic violence.
Chaos rivals assail us!
After the flurry of combat and the destruction of Fabius Bile's vile creations, the clone of Horus emerged, wielding his iconic, massive mace. But he was no match for Abaddon, who impaled his cloned father on his former weapons and lifted him up to the sky in rage. And then he spun him around 3 times and went, "So long, gay Bowser," and threw him into the sun. Okay, that didn't happen, but the death of the clone of Horus marked a monumental shift in the fate of the traitor legions. Abaddon proclaimed himself as the new War Master. Those that would follow him would instill a new legacy and cast down the shackles of their former legion's past failures. They would embrace their future, becoming savage war bands that rampaged across the galaxy. The traitors painted their armor black, signifying mourning and vengeance. In shame, shadow cast, in black and gold reborn. The former sons renamed themselves to the Black Legion, and any traitor Astartes could join Abaddon's ranks and pledge their loyalty to him, from the bloodthirsty World Eaters to the putrid Death Guard. This assortment of traitor legions joining the Black Legion makes fighting them incredibly hard to anticipate. An important distinction that makes the Black Legion different from other traitor groups is that most of them don't worship the Chaos Gods. Think of it more like a partnership. One of the 4 Chaos Gods, or all of them, empowers members of the Black Legion so that they can spread their demonic influence, and in turn, they can assault the false god and his Imperium. The warbands of the Black Legion work in isolation. They have free autonomy to raid any planet they want for their own agenda. That is, until their War Master, Abaddon, sounds the horns of slaughter for his Crimson Path. This unification of Black Legion warbands is called a Black Crusade, where the overwhelming might of the Legion drives their rage like a spear into their enemies. The first Black Crusade was in the 31st millennium, when hell itself could not contain the rage of these tarnished warriors, and they entered the Eye of Terror back into real space. No longer were they failures of the Great Crusade, but warriors of the Long War to reclaim the Imperium they had built. But the worshippers of the false emperor had been anticipating this. They saw the traitors flee into the Eye of Terror 1,000 years ago and knew they'd return someday. I mean, the planet of Cadia is a heavily militarized world specifically founded on being the first bulwark against the Chaos armies that emerged from the Eye of Terror. But the first members of the Imperium to react to the return of the Chaos Space Marines were the Black Templars, led by their heroic leader Sigismund, High Marshal of the chapter. But their pathetic and pointless heroicism was no match for the rage that filled the Black Legion's hearts, and they were all shown the true power of chaos. To signify the beginning of this new, long war, Abaddon delivered the corpse of Sigismund on a sacked Black Templar ship back to the holy world of Terra, with one simple message to herald their arrival. We are returned. The first Black Crusade led to the death of hundreds of worlds in the Segmentum Obscurus, and the Black Legion fully embraced their over-the-top, campy, grimdark nature. During this first crusade, Abaddon obtained a demonic weapon called Drach'nyen. In Warhammer 40k, demons feed off the emotions of mortals, and this sword was first born when the very first human willingly murdered one of his own kind, and it continues to grow in power with every life taken and every word of hatred spoken by humanity, which is just so over-the-top badass that you can't really help but love it. And speaking of over-the-top grim dark badassness, let me briefly talk about one of my favorite little side members in the Black Legion.
Imperial maggots! I will savor your destruction!
Hearken the Worldclaimer, mouthpiece of Abaddon, is one of the first to make landfall on a doomed planet. With his voice amplified, he declares the death of their world, telling the worshippers of the corpse god that their world will be completely torn asunder in 80 solar days and 80 solar nights. The Worldclaimer's proclamation of misery has never been proven false. Like I said, hundreds of planets would fall to the black armored warriors. Except for Cadia. Fuck Cadia. But of course, the first Black Crusade was just the first of 13 up until the modern day in the 41st millennium, all of them heralding the death of untold millions. Each one of these crusades could be their own videos in themselves, and how these crusades are written is that the Black Legion takes steps in their crimson path to destroy the Emperor, like capturing a powerful fortress or destroying a chapter of Space Marines. But more often than not, the Black Legion is eventually repelled by their enemies. So it's written in a clever way where both factions get a win under their belt. The Black Legion in the long term, and their foes in the short term. But by far their most successful crusade is the 13th one, which is also the most recent, where they destroyed the world of Cadia. They deserved it, and threw a giant spaceship called a Blackstone Fortress at their planet in a strategic assault I like to call the Fuck You Black Legion Special. And after the defending planet was torn asunder, the Eye of Terror's influence spilled into real space, creating a giant rift which has now divided the Imperium in two. The Black Legion's ultimate goal of destroying the false god enthroned on an engine of false hope was just in reach. They were eventually pushed back, and any hope of a glorious demonic victory was shattered when the loyal Primarch Rebute Guilliman was revived and Guillimaned all over the place. But that doesn't stop the Black Legion from being one of the most terrifying forces in all of the galaxy. Their unified nature and their endless hatred against the Imperium makes them one of the most despicable forces of chaos and one of the main villains you'll find in the grim darkness of the far future in 40K's setting. If you want more Warhammer lore, check out the link on your screen right now. And you can support this channel while getting something in return by checking out the link down below for a free Warhammer audiobook. I personally recommend the book mentioned in this video called The Talon of Horus. I left out a lot of detail, and if you like Chaos Space Marines, you'll love this book. And again, you can grab this free audiobook by clicking the link down in the description.